Hello everyone, welcome to my oil painting class. And today we're looking at the sunrise in Florence. I've chosen a pink background for us so we can have that lovely set of pinks and warm colors peeping through our layers. And on my palette, I have a range of cool and warm colors. I have white, emerald green, or vermilion will be fine as well. Blue-gray, cerulean, ultramarine, violet, magenta, permanent magenta, any of kind of magenta, pink type of purples. Rose madder, again something similar just to support our background. My pink was in acrylics, crimson and white. That's what I mixed for my background here. Then I have cadmium yellow and Naples yellow as well. If you don't have Naples yellow, just mix loads of white with cadmium yellow, and that's how we'll get to that color. So let's have a look at our painting. Now, first of all, I have chosen quite a elongated format. If your format is different, maybe just see if you can extend a bit more sky. If you can crop it, that will be easier for you to work in there. There are loads of small details in the painting, so I picked up slightly larger board to what I probably normally do on a screen. So it takes a little bit more space there, so that I'm not totally lost in all the details of the cathedral, but they're still easier to handle. Okay, so what I'd like us to do, I'd like us to sketch our design, our composition, using a bit of taupes and some violet. So I've got my violet here, diluting, just getting it diluted. Using taupes makes the paint settle in a little bit into the board, so it's not going to be too easy to wipe off. It's still can be wiped, but not too quickly in comparison to acrylics. Obviously, acrylics dries very quickly. Right, so let's find, first of all, horizon line. So that's where the mountains meet the valley. So if I were to look for halfway through line for my board, so my horizon probably going to be, if not quite third into kind of a third within the painting, but maybe a smaller part on top and maybe a larger, wider segment at the bottom. So I'm gonna go for somewhere here. Okay, I want to have nice, exciting mountains at the back, but at the same time, I don't want to have too much land. Okay, now a lot of little buildings, which will be simplifying. Right, next, let's decide on some big elements. Let's say our mountains. So we have a big chunk of very character type of shape of a mountain on the right. And when you look at the paintings of great masters, and with Florence at the background, you'll start recognizing these shapes. Okay. And there are loads of them overlapping each other, and the Florence is in the valley. It's lovely to see those ranges of greens and villas on tops of them. Okay, something there. Just try to make them not too similar, kind of one peak within the same distance, or maybe height-wise, or just have a look at that variety. it's not quite perfect, we can tweak it later on as well. Okay. The big shapes of the mountains. And let's find, we have taken a photograph a couple of years ago at the lovely viewing points where you can you go all these lovely palazzos and the gardens which are slowly going up one of those mountains at the back from the other side. So we have all these verandas and steps, so they're quite large elements. So if I were to look at my painting here, that's probably going to start a quarter, so if that's halfway through, I just don't want it to be too small. It is an elongated piece, but those elements at the front need to be quite big to show the scale. So we've got some nice silhouettes here. Maybe just going to go a little bit more than halfway through. Okay, maybe a little bit shorter this one. Okay. And there are some steps. I just don't know if it's steps or maybe just the tops of viewing platforms. So it looks like a very big step if it would have been a step, but I think it's not quite a step. I think it's just the top of the roof. But it's not overly important what it is. We just have some things happening here. Little gate of some sort. I want it to be a little bit more obscure later on. But as they're big and close details, I might just consider them as some of the shapes. And talking about shapes, we have a beautiful number of shapes here of the trees. Got some round dark greens of the pines. They've got this very classic Italian, almost like hats. So we've got a few of those ones somewhere here. And we've got some cypress trees. Again, very classic shapes. Transporting us to Italy. What we have on the photograph, we have two cypress trees, which are almost in line with two key towers. So maybe we'll hold on kind of that idea that there shouldn't be one below another. And when we start moving and start doing the details, or we need to move the trees, or we might need to adjust out that arrangement. Now I think I'm going to put one cypress tree somewhere a little bit more close to the edge in comparison to what it is on the photograph, and I think I might just add another one. Otherwise it's a little too precise of how things are here. There's some smaller ones maybe here, so that's why we're not photographers, we adjust things as we go. Okay, maybe another smaller group here. There will be some lovely light yellowish green trees somewhere at the front, maybe some more shadows there. So I'm arranging the spaces at the front. So we have loads of linear developments. So the mountains develop in a line, the city will be developing in a line, and the foreground developing in a line. Now we also have a lovely tree with wacky branches. It's up to you if you want to make it more with those spread branches, but at the moment I'm thinking of keeping things calm and keeping it more of a simplified shape. So the focus will be not on this tree in particular, but more seeing it as a shadow and focusing on the cathedral. So I might so far keep it as a little bit more simplified silhouette. Maybe something a bit more like that. And balanced shape will be even better for it. Again, if we want to do any more cypress trees, perhaps coming out. No. Okay. I think I might drop my horizontal big step a little lower. I think I could drop my trees just a tiny bit lower as well. I'll keep the cypress trees as they are, but I think this large one, now I placed it, perhaps looks a little too tall. It's okay for things to be taller on one side, but maybe a little bit lower on the other one, I think. And that's going to be better. Something there. And there are some lighter trees, lighter green trees, the front here as well. Again, if we haven't done it yet, we'll see it with color when we start painting with color later on. Things down. That's for me. You might have been okay with your shapes there. Okay. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I might just put another tree somewhere here. Just want slight variety of groups so they don't look too similar. Okay. Now, the reason I wanted to do my mountains and all the details at the front, because I wanted to make a decision of where I want my cathedral to be. So we have two main land masses here. So we've got the cathedral and we've got the Palazzo Vecchio tower. So I was hoping I'm going to put the cathedral a little bit more towards the right. And maybe Palazzo Vecchio will stay a little bit more where it is. So let's just try to move them slightly. Can I get some of this oil off? And see how it says. So before doing any details, let's just position it. So if that's my halfway through the painting, maybe if I'll put it almost like one side of it will be in the center and the other side, let's have a look somewhere here. And let's just place kind of, if I do a box for the whole cathedral and the dome, which will give me an idea of its proportions. Okay. So maybe dome a little bit bigger here. So then I can decide, right, is that going to be too big for the city? Okay. Or do I need to move it? I think maybe a little bit too big. So that's okay. Even wiping it off, it still gives me an idea of its size. So when I'm shrinking it, it's already a comparison. That may be a little bit smaller here. I'm looking for how much space I'm going to leave out. I want the tower and the dome overlapping the mountains. Okay. There will be lost within the city buildings and the shadows. So far it's more of a size we're considering that now. It looks okay. Definitely not in the center. That's a little bit shorter distance. That's a bit longer distance because of this smudge. It looks perhaps not quite as okay. That's not the result for the moment. Because I like there are a couple of more shapes. There is another dome below. There's another lovely cathedral, but a little bit smaller. But it would be nice to see it as a shape. There's another, maybe tiny bit more further back, further left. Need to make sure it will be smaller than the main dome or cathedral's dome. And there's a little pattern of white. So maybe I'll just identify it as a white pattern. Probably the front, the facade of one of the churches. Oh no, I think it's a roof of the baptisterium. If I'm right. Right, and let's find a space for the tower of town hall. Tower, and again the body. If we think of the shape of it first, overall together, no perspective, no anything else, just a big shape. And then decide it's probably going to be, right, if I were to continue my line of the cathedral base, that's need to go a little closer. So it stands a little closer here. Palazzo Vecchio Tower. And its body of a shadow. There's another lovely dark shadow next to Palazzo Vecchio. I might just use my base of the cathedral as its stop, and it's just something descending it. So it's kind of links it a little bit together. Looks a little bit industrious, big blocks and shapes at the moment, but we'll link it with the shadows and directions. There's another tower somewhere on the left. Now I will be playing with spaces. So if I were to put it somewhere here, it will be right in the middle between the border of my picture and the tower. So maybe one side or the other side. So the proportion of it again is different. So far we're looking for the sizes, for proportions, for how the patterns of the shapes come together. Okay. Right, another element I'd love us to consider are the buildings which are standing on the river. So we've got a wide space between one row of the buildings and another side of the river. That's why we see them more open. So if I roughly place, it's not quite a straight line, it's a little bit diagonally, but it's not perfect because all the buildings got different heights and they start in different parts of some a bit more towards the town, some a little bit more standing out towards the river. So if I'll just put a few lines down from that, and there's somewhere we'll be finishing. All we'll see in front is much more busier, darker tones. Here we'll see all the dark, lighter, open views for the buildings then. Now the rooftops might not see much, but I'm just doing a little glances of the lines for them. Okay. There's another little tower hiding a little bit close to us. I can't see a lot of details, but I can see some light and a pointy corner for the roof. Again, it's because we have a darker corner here, seeing a little bit of extra light will be quite exciting. We don't have to know a lot of details about it, but it's going to stay there. And there are a few more towers here and there, but I think we'll work with it when we start adding some color. Okay, that's good. Now, once our drawing is ready, we need a nice soft brush, and we're going to cover the whole painting with some oil. The volume of oil needs to be so the surface stays damp, but not overly runny. So you don't have to over smother it with oil. So my surface might be a bit shiny, but just doesn't have to be too runny. Okay, so it's just softer to apply paints. If we need extra oil for certain areas, we can do that one for certain individual corners.
Is this the 3 oil mix or just
yes, it is. Yes, sorry, that's our oil mixture.
Right.
So that's why I'm using a slightly darker one. So linseed oil, dibs, and forgotten the drying agent. So yeah, nice and strong.
Liquid.
Liquid, thank you very much.
Or for water-based oils, it's fast drying liquid.
Okay, there you go. Fantastic. Now, if your lines will start smudging, just be careful. Maybe even paint it almost paint by numbers around your shapes. It's a little bit slower process because I'm not putting a lot of oil. Not just because I want to keep my lines in, I just want it to be gently damp. You don't have to do it around the building, or sorry, inside of the buildings if they're too small, but or just dab it, so it just stays damp a little. Well, it's quite a lot of trees here. I might just again just do some dabs within them. So that's the reason that's why I was using tapes for drawing, because it does preserve the wrong bottle, preserves the lines better. Any of the smudges are fine as long as we can see main shapes. If your surface is very shiny and it's harder to see, if you can put your piece vertical and sometimes even leaning a little bit towards you, that might be a better, it will give you a good opportunity to get rid of all the reflections. I'm going to watch the camera, so it's not going to be picking up any of those reflections, or not as much as we can get away with. Okay. And once we've done that, we're going to straight away go for some big shapes. So I might actually use the same brush I've used just earlier. And I want to work on the city as big shapes, and then perhaps work into the mountains and then come back to some of the darks at the front. So within the city, I want us to identify some light and dark, something warm and cool. So let's start with a little bit of now analyzing. Now we see big lawn shadows. You might spot them, you might not, but there are some very elongated shadows from the early sunrise, which gives us a bit of warmth. But even within those warm segments, there are some coolnesses as well. So let's just paint them all together as warm for the first to begin with. So I'm going to have some oil. I'm going to have some rose madder. Now you're not going to see much rose madder on our pink, so I'm going to have some Naples yellow and perhaps even dab of white. Okay, maybe a little bit more Naples yellow. I'm just going to test it against my painting. That's good. And I'm going to do big strokes, creating some light. If it will start being very runny, we can adjust it gently, or if we don't want to spread it through the whole city, we can correct it a little bit. Our darks and cooler shadows will be a little bit thickly applied, so that will kind of stop the runniness. Let's carry it maybe further at the back. So I have a narrower line further on the left. It gets slightly wider, and it gets a bit more wider towards the right. There might be a little bit of light somewhere on the hills. There's some lovely light around Palazzo Vecchio. So just a tiny bit more thicker paint for me. If you're applying it, so it's semi-transparent, and within time as the paint settles, you might even have this color becoming slightly darker as it's the pink background comes through. So don't worry about that. I'm going to put a little bit of light even on Palazzo Vecchio here, and it's building. I know it's not quite the right color, but if I persevere with it for now as light, I can make adjustments afterwards. Okay. It's almost like the other way around, slightly wider segments at the left-hand side and slightly getting narrower towards the right. So that's variety is exciting. Let's find our light tower here. We painted next to the trees. just look for silhouettes. We will adjust colors later, but so let's just look for light and warmth. And I'm gonna go for a similar color for those buildings by the river. I'm gonna do some of them. My brush makes the strokes too similar, so let's just blend them. I can put some cooler colors into them afterwards as well, but let's just again work into a little bit more light as shapes. We go for tiny bit more stronger color, meaning less transparent, a little bit more paint, but similar combination. Naples yellow, rose madder. If you want to, if you don't have Naples yellow, just cadmium yellow with some extra white. A little bit of extra white. I want to put a couple of stronger, okay, that's not strong. A little bit more stronger lights. A couple of areas at the front while we're into the light. So we can combine and compare those shapes. So wider shapes at the back, very narrow at the front. As I have put something on a little bit of light on Lazavecchia, I think I'll put tiny bit on Duomo as well. It might just remind me for later some of that exciting light. It starts playing with our silhouettes. Yes, everything else is dark. It just gently starts playing with our imagination. Is anything, any other light on just more of a kissing light of those shapes. Okay, good. Maybe a bit more blurry, soft light. I just dilute it a little more. I'm just cleaning my brush and just bringing a tiny bit of diluted paint here. I think that will be soft light, but not as, but still light. And when we're ready for bringing some bolder shapes back, we'll come back to our earlier strokes. Okay, that's running quite nice. Not too busy, but just give me now an opportunity to kind of to see them, perhaps some of the buildings there or something, villas. So we've done kind of medium lights for our highlights. We probably will touch up more lights within them, but that will stay overall shapes for us. Now let's do similar with some of the cool colors now. But we need to find not the most darker shadows on the city, but something in between. And I'm using a similar brush, but that's a clean one for me. I'm loading it with some oil. And I'm going to mix it with ultramarine and a little bit of gray blue. If you don't have gray blue, just some extra white. Just not a lot of white. I just want to see that ultramarine against the the pink background. Okay, let me just check it. Okay, that's good, but it's need to be transparent. So it's kind of similar qualities to what we've done with warm, but light. And now it will be similar qualities. So it's a bit of opaque, comes from the blue-gray or your white. And the transparency of ultramarine, and obviously the oil is there as well. So let's apply it as big shapes as well. Now, if that consistency of the blue will vary, that's absolutely fine. We want that variety. So far I'll start with painting probably the city and leave the cathedral out. I'm going to try to keep my lines or strokes so they don't overpower the texture. So meaning that if I'll go vertical or horizontal, it will start being a little bit busy. So if I try to think of those shadows as flat shapes, okay, and dragging it with my brush. If it creates too much texture, just simplify your strokes. I'm just trying to make it a little bit lighter here and less patchy. Okay, maybe just simply apply some of that color across. Maybe a little bit more blue-gray for me. So that's finishing, that starts. Be careful if you're picking up with your brush some of the yellowish strokes from our previous color. Maybe just reinforce it as a cooler color or more softer combination of colors rather than bright strokes coming through. Right, I'm going to put a little bit more at the back here. Might stop some of that smudginess coming through. Quite like some of these ones. And I ended up with a very solid line behind the cathedral on the right, so I might want to soften it together. So if it smudges from one color to another, it's okay. Just for that distance, I didn't like it to be too strong. And I'm gonna go for strong ultramarine, a little bit more blue-gray, and add a little more stronger, I want slightly more darkness. The front. So when the trees, and I'll paint the trees, I'll paint them over perhaps. Might be a little easier to apply. Yeah, it's a lighter tree here. Just trying to think of some of the shadows here. One that's again to be a bit more transparent, a bit more loose, a bit more runny, a bit more that atmosphere of the morning is coming through. Anything under the trees Perhaps a little more here. Have a little bit more warmth. That's okay. Right. And we can work with our mountains now as well. If I use a similar ultramarine and blue-gray in its diluted form, and also a small dab of violet, maybe perhaps for the top of my mountains. I wanted more to stay into blue than violet, but maybe at the top, quite like the color kind of we were getting here with smudges of the violet lines. Okay, and the lower I'll get it slightly paler with bluey gray. So it's soft, not overly runny, but it's still transparent. So that's for us painting painting the surface with oil, you have a bit more control. So it's not runny now. Stays there. I quite like those runniness till they start being too strong. I'd have to adjust them with my light brush. They might run again and might give me a better option. I want to change the darkness of the mountain. Perhaps tiny bit more darker, kind of on the left-hand side of the cathedral. Cathedral's dome will be the darkest in the area. So it means that I can make the mountain slightly lighter around the cathedral and slightly lighter coming close to the horizon. So I'm adding more blue-gray. Again, the pink coming through is beautiful. If it's still coming through for you. Pink will always be, we can always come to the pinks by using some tubes and a clean brush. We can always kind of rub the whole shape back if we need to. Right, and at the back mountain, I'm going to wipe my brush to get rid of most of my white from blue-gray, and I'm going to go for the violet, but very diluted, and perhaps with a bit of just fresh white violet. I want it soft. The violet against red around pink will be looking darker. And that's all we really want. We want that hint of darkness. Now we still have quite strong outline. Well, I definitely have strong outlines for my mountains. If I can cover some of them, and partially they will be covered by the time I start doing the sky. So touch up your lines so they don't appear as strong outlines. If it appears a little bit in some of the areas, that's okay. But if it's everywhere too similar, it might be too strong. Okay, and a little bit of similar violet. Maybe a little bit darker. Artistic license for the left-hand side. Again, to balance that light, kind of, it's all bringing it together. Okay. So all these colors are working beautifully together. Tiny bit of light. I'm gonna go for some more rose madder with my violet, mainly rose madder and some white. It's a bit of violet still present. Just want some fresher, lighter pink, perhaps on my mountain a little bit. So there is a transparency of the background pink, but there's also a little variation. Maybe a little stronger pink. I want to make a slight hint of a light or some variety then. It's getting quite reflective here. Okay, maybe a tiny bit more. And then we're ready for the sky. Now I still have some pinks, purples on my brush. So all I'm gonna do is to add to anything I have on my brush is some white and make it partially transparent. Want to play with that transparency first. So let's go for some lighter strokes. I'm focusing on the silhouette of the mountains. Okay, that one goes a bit more there. So stronger silhouette border first, and then we'll soften it. And I might put a little bit stronger border somewhere here. We'll soften it afterwards. Right, now once we applied white, we can just go for wiping the brush and then just loading it with some more oil and just softening that border so we can have a little bit more creative clouds. Now, if this segment has more the same width, we need to make sure now that that will be changing. So it's going to go a little bit lower. It's going to go a bit higher. You can just paint the whole, the rest of the sky with a little bit of diluted, softer white. Again, a little bit up and down variety. You can bring some fresh white as well. In diluted form, we will have a look a little bit more at the thicker layers of white there, but maybe not yet. And that's still a little abrupt line like. So let's just do some flicks and okay, maybe not too much. Also, when you're using the oil here for the sky, if you don't want it to run, but you like the oily surface, keep the painting flat, then you might need to hover over it so to see if what's reflects what you can, how you can work there. Or have less oil, so then it's much easier for you to control the runniness. I want a little bit of touch of the white over my blues here. And softness. A little bit of change of direction here, I think, for the strokes. For me, if you're happy with your mountains, you don't have to do anything with them. The lightest, sky is looking good. The oil is gently settling for me, and I can see my top left corner slightly too dark. I want to put a little more light into it, but if I use blue-gray, it will make it tiny bit lighter, but at the same time there is a new color, and it's also just calms it. It's not super dark, so there's color. It's not just white. It's light. It's this lightening it up. It still mixes and gives me the transparency of the pink at the back. Okay. And I said we're going to soften some of the lines. So the focus on today is that seeing those shapes, like shapes we saw on a city, shapes we see on the sky and the mountains, but also soft and sharp contrast. So you have a more sharper contrast on the back of the mountains. Perhaps I can soften part of that. Just using a brush and going over part of the borders. It just gently smudges it. So I have more sharper, softer, a bit more sharp, a bit more softer, a bit lost, a bit more found. Maybe a little too sharp. Give it a lovely atmosphere. Little nuances. Just careful, I keep noticing that sometimes my strokes become too similar in widths. So just careful there. Right, and these ones now settled, I can see them too stripy. Okay, that's better. Just soften this bold red purple outline. Well, into softening, that's okay. Border of my mountains here looks a little bit too red, so I just calm it down, otherwise we'll be taking that attention away from the city. So that nice playfulness, that looks a bit too similar as well, so maybe I'll bring a little more pink, so rose madder and a bit of white, just a little too similar shape. Again, for me, if you are happy with your mountain, that's all fine as well. And it's noticing how that oil settles in for the sky. So that's became much darker again for me. So perhaps less diluted paint, maybe just a little less concentration of oil, but more of the pigment. We can revisit the sky once the city and the foreground is done. If we needed to charge up a bit more stronger pigment, where I can see it softening. and almost like creeping back. I can immediately touch it up, but the rest will have to be patient. Maybe even a small amount of Naples yellow on the sky. It's a thicker paint and just a little light within my white here. Okay, let's stop at that for the background. Right, now let's have a look at some of our shadows and greens at the front. I said shadows, but we have got a couple of lighter trees actually. I have yellowish brush, so I might start with the lighter greens and then use the same brush for the darker ones. So let's have some cadmium yellow with a dab of white. It's quite an oily area, so I'm going to use a bit of oil, but not too much. And I'm going to use, instead of emerald green, I want to keep emerald green for my fresher, kind of cooler blues, turquoise colors. So I'm going to go for a dab of ultramarine. Okay, tiny bit more. Okay, and I'm going to apply it for, so it needs to be tiny bit more, so it looks more into the green. A little bit more cadmium yellow. So white is there, but it's to support it being less transparent, but that's better. Yeah, cadmium yellow, a bit more stronger. So big block of lighter green somewhere here. And another one. If the pink comes through, that's all good. And another one somewhere here. Again, a big block. Now the two looking very similar size blocks. And so to vary it, I might consider putting it maybe a little bit more elsewhere. Okay, something like that. It's actually quite nice with extra light there. And then I'm going to go for the darker green. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to bring more ultramarine to the same color. Just adding enough oil so it's not too thick, but I don't want it runny. There's probably quite a lot of oil running towards the lower part of the painting anyway. And let's start with some of them less dark cypress trees, maybe still more blue than green. So a little thicker strokes. I'm going to work partially over my blues, but I want to keep some of the blues as well. My brush gives quite nice exciting strokes here, so I might work with that. I quite like that fogginess, just dabbing it across. Okay. Maybe that's a bigger tree, but I'll come back again with, as I said, with something darker and cooler in green, in darker blues afterwards. Right, my very dark green tree somewhere here, and one is hovering here, but again, these are my highlights on those trees. Okay, all my lovely planning of cypress trees here are gone. I can't see them. Work with your bristles in such a way so you can leave the paint. So it's the strokes support what you're painting rather than interrupt it. Okay, I've got some lovely haziness of the view. Now I wanted to have a bit of a shadow on this lighter tree. So let's just put some darker ultramarine over it in such a way so it merges with our yellows. That's that lovely light. Perhaps a little bit on this one as well. Not too much. Okay. And I'm ready for some darker tones. I'll wipe the brush, take all of that runniness, take all of the yellow and tone from it. I'm gonna go for ultramarine. More as a solid color. And I just add that over. I think I need a little bit more ultramarine. I'll go quite, if I haven't even used any oil as liquid, just the paint. And if I just work, because the surface is quite soft and there is a lot of that moisture there already. So if you go for stronger pigment, you'll have much more precise strokes. Okay, this tower could be painted over now. There's some coolness starts going over when I worked over the lighter surface. Okay, maybe some more shadows for these cypress trees. If you want to keep them more softer, quite like some of that softness there, I might just put a little bit definition maybe for some corners, but the rest I want to keep quite soft. Okay, so nice and sharp. Also, I can work with my wall here, just applying direct ultramarine, but charging it differently. So maybe more concentrated on one area, a little bit dragging the brush and just seeing how it settles in. So it might be a bit more diluted in that area. I think that's would be quite nice to see that variety. Okay. Suddenly it propels us a little bit more forward. Just soften some of these ones with my finger. Maybe a tiny bit more sharper corner here. Those lovely glazes, you can work with them again if you need to make something a bit more softer, if you need to make something a little bit more sharper, as on the trees, as on this wall, yeah. Have a playful kind of experiment. Maybe if I pick up a slightly different brush. Want a little bit more variety here. Double check that your shapes are standing straight. I think on the screen looks quite good here, but actually it's a little bit off symmetry. So let's just balance this tree back. Yeah, that's nice and soft. If you want more solid shapes, that's totally fine as well. I think I'm liking this softness so far, and I'm going to keep it a little bit more as it is, and till I've done the city, make those decisions afterwards. Now we have a nice dark rooftop on the tower here in this light lit up area. So I'm going to use the same ultramarine. Hardly any oil, so runniness is under control. And ultramarine against them, this light yellowish color will appear slightly different than against the pink background. Okay. Try not to get lost into all these details. We'll be looking for more patterns now. As we're going to get back to the city. And a little bit more solid color. Right, a couple of things, just stepping back and looking at what we've just done. I have a lot of precise light lines, which I just want to play with and make slightly different. If I can break perhaps one of these lines, so maybe it just semi-disappears or not quite appears too precise. I quite like this one. I might put some more light on it later on, just sharpen some of this one. This one just starts competing with some of the towers. So if I were to maybe cut it here a bit more diagonally, there might be a little wedge or something else. It doesn't even have to be, don't have to even know what it might be. I think there will be a gate later if we wanted to do a gate. Something just to get that light off. Again, just more suggestions than being too precise. Okay, that's looking better now, so it's not as jumpy light. And then finally, this little light, I quite liked it, but I think if I break it down a little more before my railing. So it's just comparing the shapes, comparing the lights, maybe even tidy something else here for me. Yeah, just put in a tiny bit more darker tone. It's straightened up the shape of that tower, and it's not as much attention to it now, hopefully. Okay, that's good. Right, so now I'm picking up a medium filbert brush, and I'm ready to start working with some of the thicker strokes. So let's start with a little bit of extra darks, and let's start with a little bit of extra lights at the same time. So I might have two brushes on a go. Let me get a similar size brush out. There we go. All right, so a little bit more shadows. So dab of oil just to keep the moisture on the brush going. I'm gonna go for cerulean blue and some white. And now, because I'm gonna go for well, maybe I'll keep one brush for cool colors and one brush for warm colors, but the light and darks of the cool will be changing. So I'm mixing just cerulean with some white, and it's just a beautiful color, where I can find some of the highlights on the buildings, on the city. So I'm just gonna go and place a few of those strips of color. Maybe a little bit more somewhere around the cathedral, maybe some shadows. So I'm not painting individual specific buildings, but I might find a little pattern of that light. So this is a lighter blue than perhaps some of the shadows. I did say I'm going to do some of the shadows, and I want to do that as well. But as I was mixing the color, it just came out beautifully. If I'm doing some lines or shapes, I need to make sure that they're different. So they're not line after line after line. There might be a longer line, might be a slightly wider line, maybe a line finishing on a wider chunk, because they will be associating with some buildings for us. Perhaps a little bit of that color somewhere at the front, some of the shapes of them. Shadows of the buildings by the river, or maybe even the rooftops of what's in the shadows here. So very impressionistic. Look for little dabs for some of those colors. If there's something quite dark here, maybe there will be a small glimpse of that light coming through. Okay, that's good. I might even try this color on this narrow line. Maybe that will be good. Sort of a warm color, maybe a little bit of coolness here. That's good. I'm happy with that. Now, while we're in the light, I just wiped my brush. Just wiped it off. And I'm going to load it with some white and emerald green. Okay, similar type of darkness, similar thick consistency. And let's find a little bit of extra. Okay, that's too light. I mean, just need to go slightly greener. Let's place it in the perhaps in the beginnings of, okay, you might not see it on my screen as much, but it actually comes out quite bright. I think it's the direction of the strokes I'm placing. becomes quite exciting. Maybe tiny bit lighter, maybe tiny bit more darker. I want to see almost like a mosaic of continuation of some of the blue we've done earlier. That playfulness of them. Strokes. Now it can come a little bit on our highlights, on our yellows. Or even as little windows. Okay, anything else? I think I might just do a little more around the cathedral here. Maybe a little bit around the tower. That's the emerald green starts giving that extra glow. There isn't much going on here, so I want to put some more extra darks there, but perhaps a little light. So the city becomes a little bit more alive. The distant light. Because there might be some greens around, there might be trees. To be honest, that's more of a white buildings against all the contrasts. We'll have that lovely ultramarine, well, not ultramarine, sorry, we'll have that lovely viridian emerald green feel. Maybe another little dab somewhere in this. Okay, so it's again light. Okay, too light. And little glimpses of distant light in that area. You need to be careful, not everything's going to become polka dot like with the green. Okay, that's exciting. Good. And again, I can wipe my brush. Move to a darker color. I'm ready for a little bit more strong ultramarine with a tiny bit of white. I had a bit of cerulean blue with white here, so that's enough white for me. Just kind of gives me enough control of how much white I'm placing there. Again, quite solid paint. And let's test it out on Palazzo Vecchio here. Gonna leave some of the pinks out still, but I just want to see a little bit of those shadows. There is a lovely, okay, where this one is, darkness. So think of it as a shape. Okay, and maybe smaller versions of this darkness now. Maybe below the cathedral. And your oil oily surface will give you slightly different qualities of those lines. Sometimes it will be a bit more solid, sometimes it will be a bit more soft. Now I'm fancying in some rooftops, but I don't know if I want them in blue yet. Right, maybe a slightly lighter version for me of the blue, as I want to play with some more rooftops here and more shadows, but slightly lighter version of them. So what I've done with the windows in Palazzo Vecchio here, I just put a little dabs, kind of imitating a bit of the windows, and I offset with a bigger stroke, a shadow of the building. So suddenly I have a silhouette of lit up area and I've got a silhouette of dark. These sharp border lines in Palazzo Vecchio, again, they could gently disappear partially, so that might be staying somewhere there. This is a bit solid line, maybe partially gone. Yeah, that might be a bit too dark. But those are the type of marks I want to encourage us to have. Yeah, that smaller dome becomes too white because some colors around it was too dark. So that's okay. I'll get back to that, but I know where it is. Right, any other darknesses to immediate building, kind of rooftops of the buildings by the river? Any of those shapes? If you're picking up quite a lot of yellow, your blue will start being more, not quite into the green, but might lose its darkness. Just add a dab of violet with it. Now, it doesn't have to be very dark, so I'm going to add a small amount of white to that. Still appears dark, but not solid. Now we're painting a city, so be careful with a lot of roundy shapes. And now my filbert brush giving me loads of round shapes, almost like trees. So I'm going to amend that, coming up with a little bit more sharper shapes here. So maybe more square brush will be easier. And some of the buildings will have gaps in between them. Might be just a lighter version color here. So it's okay to have some lighter versions of the shadows here. Okay, that's a bit too light. Again, if you want to do a little imitations of some of the windows, just here and there, not huge. Okay, couldn't see that. So it doesn't have to be a lot of strong, bold colors. We already have a lot of goodness in here. I'm definitely not happy with these round shapes. Maybe I'll come back to my square brush. I think because it's a lot of oil, so the texture stays in the shape of my soft filbert brush. So perhaps the square brush will give it more variety, but I do love that darkness, so I want to come back to that as well. So let's have, maybe with the same brush, less. This brush has long bristles, so it's less easy to control. That's better. Some sort of lines, some sort of identification of corners of those rooftops. So that's more natural to that environment. Type of texture. There are lots of individual small buildings, one above another, so it's okay to have those shapes changing quite a lot. Again, I'm comparing the widths of some of these shapes and they're becoming too similar for me, so let's perhaps combine some of them. If you wanted to plant an odd tree as a little block, there are some gardens in Florence. And again, this will also make you that variety of shapes. A little bit more sharpness in this corner. Okay, not too dark if you're doing anything for the background. We'll get in there. Right, I might stop with the blues and now go back with my highlights and finish off the oh, I've forgotten a bit on the tower. Just a tiny bit of them. Palazzo Vecchio's tower. Loads of red left here as background. If in doubt, if it's too small, perhaps just leave certain shapes. Come back when the paint is a little bit more kind of tacky, but maybe not totally wet. Maybe in a few days, it will allow you to sharpen things up. If your tower becomes too wide, just leave it, because we haven't done the highlights yet, and you will be able to touch things up there as well. And what I also wanted to do with the cathedral is to tiny bit to use, instead of the blue, but some permanent magenta. And perhaps a dab of violet. I'm just going to try permanent magenta on its own. Yeah, tiny bit more violet with it. So I want some darkness to the dome before the highlights around it will come in. So that silhouette is important. If there's some glow from underneath of it, still, that's wonderful.
Sorry, Julia,
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go.
Okay, no worries, Liz. No worries.
Okay.
Thank you. And we'll have a little more definition for tiny bit of darks just here again. I'm just placing a couple of individual strokes just to show some of those terracotta rooftops here. I've got a very dry brush now. Actually, it's working really well. It's a hog, it's filbert but hog brush, so it allows us to place paint a little bit more precise. So I'm working into the pattern of those terracotta roofs, maybe darker windows. But there was another tower somewhere here. So I'm trying to find an exciting pattern more than anything else. I think that's will work quite nice here. Yes. So again, permanent magenta and violet. There's no white in it as well. There's plenty of oil around to support it. I think that's will work just a little bit extra special. Okay, that dome, wanted more light around it, so I'm going to leave it as it is for the moment. But I can offset this light by extra darkness. Okay, don't want this one to stop too abruptly. Okay, I'll put some light there, that will be okay. And perhaps again, tiny bit more something to support this shadow. So these shadows I'm trying to support with something below. Okay, that's lovely. Tiny bit more of this darker magenta and violet, I think needs some sharpening into this corner. Now I found that right ingredient and a good brush for it. And maybe some more darker windows if they will come through. It's more of a suggestion than anything else. It's too much, we can soften things up as well. Okay, just tighten things up there. Right, and I'm ready for the lighter brush now as well. Tiny bit more softening here, as it's saw in the shadow. Right, my lighter brush now. I'm gonna go directly with Naples yellow, which on its own will be very strong. And let's place it on some key areas, like the side of the cathedral. I don't know if you can see much there. Maybe sharpen up some of the areas, and I think that's need a bit of white. So a bit too yellow, Naples yellow and white. Where we played with our highlights, just going to check in some areas where it could be sharpening any of the borders. This dome could be sharpened a little. So I'll go for some thicker paint and introducing it as in stronger strokes, and then perhaps or dabbing them or softening them, a little bit of both, a little bit of that playfulness of the city. So we're going to lighten up the area, so some of the fronts of the buildings. so I can at the same time tidy my buildings here as well. Those were nice green windows, but the lighter building looks better. Okay, that's exciting. So continue just using Naples yellow and white. Okay, this building had a little bit of extra light on its corner. Maybe there would be a little support to it elsewhere. Right, I wanted some light shapes on a dormer. So if I use my light brush, but because there's a lot of paint, that violet is there, we'll just make it paler. Actually, this one stands out a bit too strong, so I can gently soften it. And I want to do my tower here. So let's bring a little bit of darkness here as well. And paint back the mountain if you need to shrink it or need to touch it up. Okay. Get some light across. On little windows there as well. But before I do the windows, let's just work with any details around the dormers. Windows are very exciting, round, very distinctive. Right, anything else around here? A little bit of light within the shadows here. I think that's good. Right, I need to finish my tower now. And little darker windows. Now, tower, I've been debating what color it should have, but I think I'm gonna have to go for the blue, ultramarine and cerulean. I did like it into the red, so maybe I'll leave a little bit of red for it as well. The green, the emerald green on the side makes it glowing. Going back to tiny details right at the end of rooftops, windows. Just need to tidy things up to have that a bit more exciting silhouette. Only a tiny bit more darker. Okay, that's better. and then checking the shape. So if I'm looking at the tower, can I slim it off by painting something lighter around it? Can I make it a little straighter? Again, perhaps by painting the background around it rather than just putting a line. You can always touch up the mountains with the correct color. Don't worry too much about the shapes of the window, just think of bigger kind of picture. Maybe this dome will have a little bit of extra light as well. Right, any last highlights of Naples yellow and white? Maybe little glimpses of light in between, just more to show the surfaces. Again, I'm trying to focus our viewers' eyes on the dormer, so that kind of busyness around the area will be probably preferred. And a bit of sharpness there. Any other little lights? I think maybe city waking up with a little more extra light here. Leading, maybe there's a street light, maybe there's a more of a park, maybe glimpses of silhouettes of roofs lit up. I think that's makes a tiny bit more life. Just going for the lighter color, but it smudges within existing colors, and it's enough to have that variety. And if we step back, that's looking quite exciting. Just checking anything else we could add, perhaps in the distant mountains. Just soften maybe this extra new light here, bringing it all together. As I said, if we wanted to bring anything thicker in texture for the sky, now we see the thickness of the clouds, of the lights here. I think that will be quite good too. Maybe a little bit of extra thicker strokes for me here. Almost direct, well, it's not almost, it is direct paint coming for the sky. And also I think I'll use blue-gray, maybe somewhere here. It looks too soft and very different to the texture of the city. So if I'll make a couple of strokes here to balance it, to show that depth. That's better, a bit more spontaneous as well. Looks a little too smooth in this area as well. So again, back to rose madder and white. And some thicker stroke. Simplified, and if I wanted to make it extra exciting, I might just add some extra maybe light in the valley. as the valley is waking up. There might be some villas. There might be a little more distant light. I'm just checking that I'm seeing a true image, so it's not overly reflecting and I'm not seeing it properly. I think my darker tone as well for the back. So I've done tiny bit of highlights. I think a little gentle darks. Again, there might be some distant villages. Can't see that on the photograph, but I think that's will give it. It doesn't have to be villages, might be just how the mountains build up, how much we see the shadows. I think that's will just add a little more to balance our busy city. Right, I think I'm quite happy with that. I've left a tiny bit of red here on the front, which I've forgotten. I'm going to put a tiny hint of yellow with light and just soften and take my attention away from it. So some sort of steps going on. There's something developing here. I was considering doing maybe some fencing there, but I think that's plenty. It's suggestive enough to not to take the attention away. So let's stop at this. And again, always look back at the painting, perhaps, in a couple of days, put it away, put it aside, and it will start giving you more ideas, or that's it, we've done it well, stop, or maybe need to touch something else up, maybe need to compare some of the darknesses. I'm looking perhaps putting something tiny bit more dark at the front, but it's a combination of, you know, if I were to put something extra darker, I might lose that sharpness and that focal point for the trees at the for the buildings at the back. So I'll play with the idea in my mind and make my final decision in the last few days. So thank you very much for today. I hope you had lots of fun painting on a wet surface, and I look forward to seeing your paintings.